Hello, viewers. My name is Ruvimbo Mchenje, and we are pleased to have you on Allzim News. Please follow us on our Facebook, it's Allzim News. On Twitter, it's Allzim News. On Instagram, it's Allzim News. Today, we are taking the CAP 3 discussion forward. We are going to be speaking to the former Minister of Constitutional and Parliamentary Affairs during the Government of National Unity between 2009 and 2013. Mr. Matinenga, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
We're going to start the conversation with why did we have a whole ministry on constitutional affairs during the Government of National Unity between 2009 and 2013?
If you recall, the Government of National Unity was a product of negotiations between the MDC, led by the late Morgan Tsvangirai, Zanu PF, led by Robert Mugabe, the late, and the other MDC, which was led by either Professor Mtambara or Walshman Ncube. I say either because there was a bit of a turf war between the two of them, but that's not the point. But there were three parties who agreed after negotiation to enter into a new era of political governance in Zimbabwe. And this was put together in a way by the then president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. And the parties then signed an agreement, which was called the Global Political Agreement. And amongst the issues it was supposed to address was the making or drafting of a new constitution for Zimbabwe. That's how my understanding and my knowledge of how this came about.
All right, thank you. Most people say the greatest achievement of opposition during the Government of National Unity was actually ensuring that we have a new constitution. We had public hearings, we had a referendum, people voting yes, people voting no to the constitution. What is it that was happening during these public hearings? What was informing these clauses that we have in our 2013 constitution? You know, issues such as a 2 5-year term for one president. We also had issues of the army being custodians of the constitution. We also had issues of having a gender commission to deal with issues, all issues pertaining gender. And all those things are coming to an end because we are going to amend the constitution through amendment bill number 3. What is your comment on the gains that you had in 2013 and what is happening 13 years later?
You know, as part of the Global Political Agreement, which I'll call the GPA, there was a chapter 6, which specifically addressed constitution making. This chapter created or set up what was known as COPAC, which had representatives from the three contestants, if you may call them, MDCT, MDCM, and Zanu PF. So these people chose 2 delegates each. Okay, Zanu PF chose Patrick Chinamasa and Nicholas Koche. They were the lead negotiators. The MDCT, which was the Tsvangirai group, chose Tendai Biti and Elton Mangoma. The MDCM chose, if I recall, there was Welshman Ngube and Priscilla Airambu Mishonga. So these were the co-negotiators representing the three parties. But in addition to these co-negotiators, you also had other COPAC members who made up committees. There was Douglas Monzora, who was representing MDCT. There was Paul Munyarazi Mangwana, representing Zanu PF. And there was, I think Mkize is late now, was representing the other MDC. So all these people were tasked to look at certain aspects of issues which needed to be addressed. Now, the reason why specifically a chapter was set aside to look at a new constitution was because of the experiences Zimbabwe had. You're aware that after 1980, in the mid-90s, the constitution was amended. It was amended so that it introduced what we then refer to as the imperial presidents. Basically, Zanu PF under Mugabe wanted a one-party state. And if we're grown up then, you'll recall that the person who, my recollection, who actually contested this concept of a one-party state was the late Edgar Tekere, who had been in Zanu PF, a very senior member of Zanu PF. But there was therefore this concern by a lot of people in the country about the propensity to have a one-party state, and that being led by Zanu PF, which wanted to stay in power. So after the 1980s, there was agitation for a constitution which addressed particularly the issue of a one-party state and other issues of interest amongst the people. And you mentioned the issue of term limits. Because I said, why is it that Mugabe and his group want to stay forever in power? Mm-hmm. How do we prevent that? Right? We can prevent that by having a term limit or term limits. So you then had the National Constitutional Assembly, you remember, which was initially led by Morgan Tsvangirai, the likes of Love Momaduku and others, who said, look, let's agitate for a new constitution. And when this agitation grew bigger and louder, Zanu PF then sought to steal this agitation from the people and formed what it called their own constitution-making process. You remember the Jonathan Moyo era? Mm-hmm. And I think it was the Jonathan Moyo era. It was Edson Robgo, who was then Minister of Justice, who said the NCA is neither national, nor constitutional, nor an assembly. Mm-hmm. You know, real rubbishing. That agitation and that concept, and they then put Jonathan Moyo in front, the flip-flopper, as you know him. Depending on who is in power, then you'll do anything. Anyway, he led this process. And to give credit to them, at that time, they said, look, because they were so convinced that everybody supported Zanu PF position. Let's have a referendum. So we went to a referendum on the constitution, which was cobbled up by Zanu PF, but which also sought to seek the views of the people in a way which they did. And came the referendum in 2000. And Mugabe, for the first time, was soundly beaten in a referendum. He became so angry that Mugabe then initiated the land invasions. Admittedly, the issue of land was always critical to the fight for liberation. But when that started, by the people from Seke, if you recall, it was actually a response to a bitter defeat on the constitutional referendum in 2000. So when that project was defeated, the NCA proceeded to agitate, and there were meetings held. I was not part of them. I was a member of the MDC, but I was never, and I've never held a position in the MDC, either at party level or whatever. But just to digress, my position was I don't need to be in the structures in order to be able to participate in opposition politics. And my view was, as a lawyer, if I get swallowed into the structures, I'll be compromised. And my independence as a lawyer will be jeopardized. So I said, look, I will support the party in any way I can, as long as I'm not in the structures, so that I can independently advise on the law. Anyway, let's go back to the Constitution. And no, there were meetings. There were continuous meetings. And I was not one of them. There were continuous meetings. I think the last one, which I recall, was a meeting which produced what was called the Kariba draft. But the Kariba draft, again, fell short of the expectations of many people. The NCA then sort of went its own way, and the Zanu PF MDC relationship stayed, and it was on that basis that they produced the Kariba draft. But because it was accepted that the Kariba draft is not people-driven, that was the cry. We must have something which is people-driven. We must have something, Ruimbo, where you can say, I was party to this. They came to ask me about this, and I contributed in this manner. That is the whole concept of why people speak and talked about a people-driven constitution. So the Kariba draft again was put aside, and when the GNU came in, I was then invited to become the Minister of Constitution and Parliamentary Affairs. I accepted that appointment with a bit of humility, but I was not particularly sure how I related to the various committees set up in that chapter 6. But anyway, that's by the way. And my misgivings are now irrelevant. But I think during the process, when I say we, I'm talking about COPAC, because at the end of the day, I then would report to cabinet as to what was happening. And we made sure, I'm not saying that I went everywhere in the country, but you don't do that. or in any position of leadership. You don't do that. You set up institutions. You delegate people to address on issues which must be addressed by the people in a language which they understand. So, in respect of the term limits, you will say, what do you want? Mugabe has been in power since 1980. And there is nothing which stops him from being in power until he dies. So we need to address this issue. We are not directing this maybe at Mugabe, but he was the person who was there. He was the epitome of what was wrong with a non-term limit presidency. You know, during my various addresses, I always referred to the big man syndrome. Whether you remember it or not, I don't know. But the big man syndrome is what we see today. The big man syndrome is what we saw in Mugabe. The big man syndrome is what we see in Mnangagwa, perfecting what Mugabe did in a very unfortunate sense. And you know, the big man syndrome, the big man will look at not at what the people want, but you look at what he wants, what his family wants, what his relatives want, what his party wants. Because what your party wants is not necessarily what everybody wants. So we then looked at all these issues, and we consulted on a constituency basis. We consulted on a ward basis. For an example, I come from Buera West, or then from Buera West. I say then because come 2020, was it 2023? My wife was the runaway winner in Buera West. The delimitation removed us from Buera West and put us in Buera North. So yeah, you know, it's one of those things. So there were meetings held in all the wards. Like in Buera West, there were about 8 wards, I think. So at least you had 8 meetings. In fact, more. Sometimes we had more than 2 meetings. It all depended on how the people are able to gather, how the people are able to express themselves. You address churches. You address, you know, professional meetings. And you then go through with them what we're trying to do. Because we had a template that these are the issues we want to address, having regard to the unfortunate experiences which had happened in this country. You know, the biggest problem we had was not only the big man syndrome, but because of the big man syndrome, allied with that was the desire to force people to do what they don't want to do. You force people to vote for you. You force people to attend meetings. Anything. You know, if you look at our situation today, a group of, whether genuine supporters or not, I don't know, will gather together and they describe themselves as so and so for ED. Yes. I was looking at a little video yesterday. You know, this Chimombe, was it Chimombe Mpofu? Yes. The goat people. Yes. I am told, I was looking at this video, I am told, when he went to prison, he said, look, I'm a central committee member for Zanu PF. I'm going to form a group here in prison of prisoners for ED. You know, we have gotten completely lost along the way.
And he did.
Yeah.
He formed prisoners for ED.
Yeah.
In prison.
You know, we've completely gotten lost. You know, everything evolves around a person, not an idea, but a person. But sadly, the same is happening in the opposition. You know, things evolve around an individual, not around an idea. And this is primarily why in 2013, when people addressed ideas, not completely, not thoroughly, not fully. I want to accept that the Constitution may have still needed, some inputs, some changes, but some changes for the better, not some changes to diminish what is already a good document, like what they are doing today.
Yeah.
When people did not realize this, when they said they are going to amend the Constitution to remove the running mate clause,
Yes.
which they did. They are going to amend the Constitution to extend the term of office of the Chief Justice, which they did. Now, they are wanting to change the Constitution in order to extend the term of the President.
Now that you've brought out these issues,
Yeah.
We had the First Amendment, we had the Second Amendment, now we are going for the Third Amendment.
Yes.
We've had people say, for the Third Amendment, we need a referendum.
Yes.
Because this is what people were clamoring for back then.
This is what people were clamoring for, and they had it included in the Constitution.
In the Constitution. Yeah. They say this is one of the best documents in the world. You say it needed some panel beating for the better, but in its current state, people applaud it for what it is. So, what is your take on this issue of a referendum for amendment number 3?
I don't think anybody with any modicum of sense justifying this amendment. And I don't see anybody with any modicum of sense. You don't need to be a lawyer to say that this Constitution speaks about a 5-year term. And what people don't understand is that we say that our elections are coterminous. You are looking at electing your councillor for the rural or local for local authorities, for members of parliament, and for the president. It's all a 5-term cycle. So when you say, this is why they say, well, if you extend the term of the president, you are now also extending, because they are aware of it.
Yeah.
But what it means is that you are dangling a carrot to the member of parliament. Look, if you are agreeable, you have got 2 extra years. So some of these people don't work, you see, and some of them never worked.
Yeah.
And some of them will give anything to stay in parliament. Mm-hmm. And this is primarily why, when I accepted to run for parliament in 2008, I made 2 conditions. I said, firstly, I will not run in Harare in an urban constituency. Mm-hmm. Because I believe that I'm more useful in my rural home. I know them, I know their needs, equally they know me. But for an example, if I run in Harare East, that's where I stay, I knew nobody in Harare East except my neighbor, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I said, look, I will go and run in my rural home. It was a bit of arrogance on my part, but I was confident that I'll pull it off. Mm-hmm. I said, when I run, I'll win that constituency for the MDC. And they said, but, Zanu PFs has been, I said, don't worry about it. I know how to go about it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I said, but when I run and I'll win, I will do 5 years. And I'll say, bye-bye, thank you very much. I go back to my practice. And that is exactly what I did. When I went back to Buhera and I said, look, I want to be your candidate. I'm not going to tell you what I did, but, basically, people, I noticed this attitude that you have a meeting, a public meeting, and there will be members of the CIO who will be about 100 meters away. But they're recording everything you are doing. Mm-hmm. And at the meeting, instead of addressing issue, you're just lambasting these people. Murimbo kadzani Mugabe, Murimbo kadzani, chi. Then I said, no, but that is not what we want. At best, these people do not belong to Zanu PF. What you're actually doing is to push them in the Zanu PF camp. Yeah. What I want to do is, I want to invite them. I want you to provide chairs for them. Provide chairs for them, yeah. Let's introduce them as, these are members of the Central Intelligence Organization. They are working for us. It's the people. Because their power is derived from us. Yeah. You know, I said the same about traditional leaders. I said, I'll visit each and every traditional leader in my constituency. And I did. And, you know, it was so enlightening how these people interacted. Obviously, naturally, on your first visit, they're a bit worried. But what really does this person want? Mm-hmm. Because the majority of them had been told that Zanu PF is your God. You go against Zanu PF, that's the end of you. I suppose this is the same thing which has happened to Josina Jome. Yeah. She makes a statement setting out exactly what has been happening. 2 minutes later, she's removed from office, unconstitutionally, for that matter. So, you know, when I said I'll go and win, I'm saddened though that when I won in 2008, do you know, having been pronounced as the MP for Boera West, I was arrested and I was in remand prison for 30 days.
After you won?
Yes. And why was I arrested? Because I dared win a rural constituency, which was always Zanu PF. Yeah. And they made all sorts of allegations, which were simply not true. But you know what? Just to show you how people assess and understand these situations. There was a chief, he's late now, in Ward 3, Chief Kwebu. He was so upset that I had been arrested and allegations made against me, when on that day, I was meeting him in a particular house, and he was reporting to me how people were being harassed and assaulted. And when I went, I was tried. We're in a very funny country. I said, you know, when I remarked, I said, you know, Mugabe's got some sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Because when I was made minister in February 2009, my allegation of inciting public violence was still pending in Mutare Regional Court. So I would sit in cabinet today, contribute whatever. Tomorrow I'll go in before a magistrate and be tried for inciting violence. And this is a minister of Constitutional Parliamentary Affairs. Anyway, this chief was so incensed by the lies made against me that he said, I want to come and testify before the magistrate. And I said to him, Chief, you've got nothing to do with this. Get out of it. It's all political. Mm-hmm. And he said, you know what? I don't care about being chief. If they want this, whatever ring, they can have it. And he came and he testified on my behalf. And the magistrate, the regional magistrate, I don't want to mention a name, his comment was, in a judicial career, he had never come across a witness so credible as Chief Kwebu. But anyway, I digress a lot because of a lot of things which happened to me in my career. But when you look at what is happening now, I do not know whether you guys have had access to the submissions I made to Parliament.
You made them written?
Yes.
No, we didn't.
No, I made written submissions to Parliament. They were actually carried by news hawks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can forward them to you. I made written submissions to Parliament, giving the context of constitution making, giving the context of what is wrong with the amendments, and suggesting the way forward. Mm-hmm. I think people mistake the opposition to CAP 3. They misrepresent that. They say, no, but you can amend a constitution. And the position is not that we are saying you cannot amend the constitution. Of course you can. What is simply being said is when you amend, you must amend it in accordance with the provisions of the law. And the law says if you are going to change term limits, you must go for a referendum.
It's the law.
Yeah, that's the law. So, yeah, change the term limits, do whatever you want, but please go to a referendum. That's number one. That's referendum number one. Referendum number two is the law says when you are changing those term limits, the incumbent, the president, the person who is the president at the time, cannot run, cannot benefit from that amendment. But he can, again, if you go to a referendum. So what do we have in this country? You have that amendment saying I can do 7 years, and that Mnangagwa must go up to 2030. And it's so. I say it's so absurdly crass and evil that you cannot understand how people will sit after a day's work with their wives, with their children, and say, yeah, we want to change the constitution in these terms. Surely they must talk about this at all. How do they explain to their children? Iwe Ruvimbo, if you were my daughter, I mean Mnangagwa's position, how do I explain to you? Or do you close your your thinking?
The president says, the people that justified the term extension said, the president has projects running that he needs to finish.
That's the most absurd excuse I've ever heard. Government is not made up of a person. It is an institution. I don't want to say this, but I think it needs to be said. What happens if Mnangagwa drops dead today? Does government come to a standstill?
No.
So how do you say, he has got projects which he must complete? A government project is ongoing, right? Mm-hmm. If that project is not completed, the person who steps into your shoes will carry it forward. That is what government is all about. It ceases to be that when you say, I'm the big man and nobody else can do anything without me. Yeah. And then after 2030, what are you going to do? So if all the projects you were doing in the past 10 years have to be finished in the 2-year period between 2028 and 2030. Yes. Oh, come on. It's silly. It is silly. Not only is it silly, it is lunacy of the worst kind.
The others actually said, we want the president to stay up until 2030 because the cycle of elections is exhausting. It's exhausting, plus it takes away money.
Look, let's be honest with ourselves. Any election, no matter how often or how infrequent you hold, will cost money. If you want to follow, if you want to be a properly governed country, then you must always be prepared to make provision for an election, which you must pay for. in addition to this, there is also, well, elections are toxic. And you want, you don't want that frequency. So is it being suggested that, well, as long as it is 5 years, it will be toxic? But if it is 7 years, it will not be toxic.
They were saying it will extend the time of relative peace from 5 to 7.
Why do you have violence? That's the basic question. Why do you promote violence?
Now that you're mentioning something about violence, during the public hearings, in some areas there was no opposition at all. In some areas, those that tried to oppose, I remember in Chitungwiza, a guy that stood up to oppose, a microphone was taken from him and he was followed outside and beaten.
Oh, yeah.
So, you were speaking about, the referendum, the constitution-making process during the GNU, and you were talking about having meetings, let's say 2 per ward sometimes, 3 per ward sometimes, 1 per ward sometimes. But we have a public hearing for a province like Harare, 2 million registered voters, having maybe at most 60 people making a suggestion during a public hearing.
In fact, less than 50.
Less than 50. And before everyone can contribute, or before the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee says we have come to the end of this meeting, we have violence in between. We have a whole lawyer being assaulted, having his phone stolen on video, captured on video. Yeah. But how then do we marry this process to what the process that brought this constitution into being, and the process that we are going through now to amend the same constitution?
Look, this whole consultation process is a farce. It is a huge farce. Mm-hmm. I went to Murambinda. That's where I come from. I went to Murambinda a day before the consultation meeting was being held. I said, I want to go there, I want to attend, and I want to contribute. Murambinda is 250 km away from here. Guess what happened? I was not allowed in the meeting.
What did they say? What were their reasons for not allowing?
It's full. The hall is full. But, and someone said, and some were saying, but this is Honorable Matinenga. And some Honorable Wapinda Udara, and Dora.
There was nothing for you. They didn't want you to attend.
I don't know whether it was directed at me, because there were hopes of people who could not access the venue. And I was one of them. And I thought, I've been an MP in this area, they will know me. But no, I couldn't get in. I was so upset, I just went back in my car and I drove back to Harare.
I think this was probably one of the things that Honorable GSC was talking about. Yes. That there seemed to be an effort, a concerted effort, to have a certain type of people speak on the bill. It was almost rehearsed. You go to Seke, it's the same thing. Someone just stands up and says, we do not want the Gender Commission because it duplicates the work of the Human Rights Commission. You go to Bindura, someone stands up and says the exact same thing.
There is no doubt at all that what Zanu PF did was to identify its members. And these were the only people who were going to raise their hands and make contributions. I do not know whether they would have been working with the chairman of the committee, which was in charge of managing that consultation. But you could be in that room. But if you were not identified beforehand as someone who should speak, in favor of Cap 3, you would not put up your hand. You knew where you belonged. Ini handitauri. Vanotaura varipo. This is what happened. And if you dared, you made reference to these participants in Chitungwiza. The same happened to students from Bindura University who dared speak. And immediately the police are on them. And I said, what's wrong with our police force? Do they believe that they belong to a political party? What type of training are they getting? I happen to know the commissioner of police. And I always say to myself, whatever got into him? When I used to know him, I considered him as one of the better cops. But I can't believe that all this is happening under his watch. I really cannot believe it. When I was Minister of Constitutional Parliamentary Affairs, Virginia Mabiza was my PMSEC. And I don't want to go into this, but when they wanted to make a man PMSEC, I refused. I said, because you said to me, this ministry is going to have a female PMSEC. There are a couple of deputy directors here. One of them is this one, Virginia Mabiza. Why don't you make him a PMSEC? And I worked very well with her. I thought she had a head on her shoulders. But, I do not believe Kutakazo Jigswachi. As AG, you're not supposed to be partisan to support a specific party policy. You are supposed to be looking at the laws, at the constitution, at the supreme law, and say, look, you can't do this. This is what the constitution says. And now, what does Mabiza as AG says? No, this is because it happens in other African countries. South Africa is one of them, which she mentions. What she doesn't tell people, maybe she doesn't know, I don't know, or whether she doesn't know or she's simply misrepresented, is that the South African Constitution provides for full proportional representation. So your smallest party will be represented in parliament. This is why the South African Parliament has got people like Gideon Mackenzie as a minister. Because that constitution, unlike ours, says every little parliamentary vote counts. And that is why that parliament, that South African Parliament, is so vibrant. Because everybody is involved. But ours is not like that. We don't have full proportional representation. Maybe if we had, I don't know whether it will make any difference.
You spoke about how Zanu PF mobilized for these public hearings. Is there any reason why the opposition in Zimbabwe could not mobilize to defend or to oppose the clauses in Cap 3?
Look, Zanu PFs got the power of incumbency. But sadly, that power of incumbency is supported by institutions which would otherwise be supporting the country, the nation, not a political party. You have the Central Intelligence Organization, which actually does Zanu PF bidding. You have the police doing the same. You have a lot of government institutions. If you've seen the number of times that government departments or institutions will scramble to flight adverts because something has happened. Someone was actually saying, do you know that who works for a local authority? Do you know that we were actually told to contribute to the First Lady's Valentine's Day? How would you do that? And they do it. And now, recently, there's been an order that each local authority must buy Mnangagwa's book. Yes. So Zanu PF then manipulates these institutions in order that these institutions pursue a partisan political path. This is not to say that the opposition should not organize. They should. And I'm extremely disappointed that there wasn't any organized opposition to CAP 3. When I left Parliament, my attitude was that I've done my bit. Other people should also get hold of the stick and run away with it. And run with it, not run away with it. But I've been extremely disappointed at what I see as a disintegration of opposition politics in this country. I don't want to specifically address the issues of who should have done what in terms of leadership. I'm happier to have whoever it is who wants to defend his position to sit there across the table to me, and I'll tell him or her what I think of her or him. I don't think this. I'm not one of those who believes in megaphone diplomacy, as some other people. But I again also think that anybody with any sense has to accept that we've been let down big time by opposition leadership. I think this is, if you don't have a properly organized opposition party, properly structured, how do you suppose people will be able to do or to follow a particular path? I'm not saying people are stupid. People know what they want and what they don't want. But there is need for genuine leadership, genuine, transparent leadership. We haven't got it, sadly.
Just maybe as parting shots, how do you see this proceeding? We have the bill gazetted, we have the public hearings, we still have an opportunity to write to Parliament with our submissions on CAP 3. What is likely to happen between now and the time that the bill is tabled before Parliament?
I'm an internal optimist, in the sense that maybe at the end of the day, common sense will prevail. And I know that my optimism will not see the end of day. But from what I hear, if there is a secret vote in Parliament, we may have a surprising no result, no to CAP 3.
But baby, remember that everyone stands to benefit. If we have an extension up until 2030, the MPs tend to benefit.
Yes, but yes, there is that desire to have 2 more years of parliamentary privilege and whatever. But do you know that it's for a person who is not employed, but for a person who has got better things to do, our parliamentarians are so ill-paid, it's unbelievable. They really are ill-paid. And if it comes to principle, if you are able to talk to your MP, look, they may well say, look, why don't I offer myself in 2028 and convince the people that I'm the best candidate anyway? I don't know. Well, if we can't force a referendum, then we have Mnangagwa and his cabal with us until 2030. As to what institutions will do or are going to react, I don't really know. You see, there have been positions taken by a section of war veterans who have said this is absolute rubbish. We can't go this way.
There were scheduled court dates, is there not?
Yeah. We have had retired generals. They say retired generals and senior civil servants, we have not bothered to come out in the open. And I don't know whether these groups have looked at all the options and asked the question, if we don't have a referendum, what do we do? I wish I had somebody I knew whom I could ask. I know some of them, but I'm worried of, because these days you never know who you're talking to. Yeah. And you never know who is reporting to. So, yeah, that's the challenges we have. Because I've been saying, I said, look, when these generals made this statement, they must have weighed all the options. Not only as individuals, but as a group. They must have engaged their serving colleagues and say, look, what is happening is unconstitutional. What are you going to do as an institution which is established in terms of Section 212 of the Constitution? Or maybe someone can say, you could argue, it's not a term or whatever, but if you look at the breach of a constitutional obligation by Mnangagwa regarding the firing of J.C. Majome, then anybody with any sense will say, ladies and gentlemen, we are fast heading in very deep and unknown waters. The sooner we do something, the better. Whatever they do, I don't really know. Because I think, going back to the question I asked about organizing the people, if we had had an opposition, a leadership, which would properly organize, you'll recall during Tsvangirai's time, you'll say, look, we don't want to confront anybody. We are staying away. We are staying at home. That's all you need to do. You can go further and then say, okay, we have stayed at home for 2-3 days. Now we are going to walk to Harare, to the city. And you're not being violent. But you are doing what the Constitution says you can do. But we don't have people of that organizational resolve who are able to put themselves right there in front and say, I am leading on this account. So I'm 73 years now. I really think that there are people much younger than me who, if they think deeply, they will be able to deliver. But as long as they understand that when you are talking about organizations, when you are talking about institutions, you're not talking about individuals. The moment you talk about indigent, then finish. You are dead. To me, you don't qualify to lead. But yeah, that appears to be what we have in this country. But anyway, we'll see.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the former Minister of Constitutional and Parliamentary Affairs during the Government of National Unity between 2009 and 2013, dissecting what CAP 3 is and what can be done to resist the provisions that CAP 3 is giving us. Continue following us on Facebook, it's Aussie News, on X, formerly Twitter, it's Aussie News, on Instagram, it's Aussie News. Thank you for watching.